I still remember that night. The forest so quiet it almost felt alive. My friends and I had decided to go camping deep in the woods of northern Oregon, far beyond where cell signals reached or roads were paved. We wanted silence, a break from everything, and we definitely got that. There were 4 of us: me, my best friend Dylan, his girlfriend Leah, and her cousin Mark. We parked our truck near a narrow dirt path and hiked nearly 2 miles before setting up camp beside a small, gurgling creek. The first evening was perfect. I mean, the kind of perfect you see in pictures. The stars were so clear they almost didn't look real. The firelight flickered across our faces, and the sound of the flowing water mixed with our laughter. We cooked some food, told a few bad jokes, and talked about how none of us had ever gone this far off-grid before. It felt like a real adventure. But then, around midnight, the temperature just plummeted. And with the cold came this silence. It was strange. The crickets stopped chirping, the wind died down. There was just this uncomfortable quiet that hung heavy between us. I remember Dylan saying, half jokingly, "Feels like the woods are holding their breath." We all laughed, but I could tell Leah didn't like it. She kept glancing toward the trees, like she was expecting to see something move in the darkness just beyond our fire. We all turned in for the night, but at around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a sound. It was footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunch, crunch, just beyond our campfire's dying glow. My first thought was that maybe Mark had gotten up to pee, so I whispered his name. No one answered. I just laid there listening, and then the footsteps stopped. A few seconds later, I heard something else. It was a sound like breathing. It wasn't close, not yet, but it was steady and weirdly human-like. Except it was coming from the direction of the creek, where no one had gone. My stomach tightened. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped my tent as slowly and quietly as I could, trying not to wake anyone up. The air outside was freezing, and my breath fogged up instantly. I shone the light toward the creek. Nothing. Just the black shapes of trees, the dark water, and this eerie mist rolling low across the ground. I took one cautious step forward, and then I just froze. Across the creek, maybe 30 feet away, stood something. I couldn't make out its face, but it looked tall, too tall to be a person. It was completely motionless, its outline faint but unmistakably human-shaped against the deeper black of the forest. My flashlight flickered for just a second, and in that split moment, I swear I saw it tilt its head slightly, like it was looking right at me. I stumbled backward, tripping over the tent flap, my heart hammering so hard, I thought it would wake everyone else up. The light flickered again, and when it steadied, the thing was gone. I just stood there for what felt like an eternity, scanning the trees, but there was nothing. No movement, just that oppressive silence again. After a few minutes, I started to rationalize. It was just my mind playing tricks on me, right? Maybe a tree stump, maybe the fog, maybe just pure exhaustion. I crawled back into my tent and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I told Dylan what I'd seen. He just laughed it off, said I probably saw a shadow or a deer. But Leah looked at me differently. Her face was serious, almost like she'd seen something too. When I asked her about it, she just said she'd had a weird dream. That someone was standing over our tents, just watching us sleep. That sent a chill right through me. That night, we built a much bigger fire, more for comfort than for warmth. We tried to shake off the unease, playing music from a little portable speaker, laughing way louder than we needed to. But then, around midnight, that same quiet fell over the woods again. That sudden, heavy stillness. I was tending the fire when I noticed Leah staring past me into the darkness. Her face had gone completely pale. She whispered, "Don't turn around." But of course I did. Just outside the ring of firelight, maybe 10 feet away, was that same tall figure. It wasn't moving, just standing there. The light from the flames barely reached it, but I could see the pale outline of skin and 2 dark hollow spots that looked like eyes, fixed right on us. Dylan grabbed a burning stick from the fire and shouted, but before he could even take a step closer, the figure just backed away into the dark. It was completely silent. There was no sound of leaves crunching, no footsteps, nothing. It just vanished. We stayed awake the whole night after that, all four of us, huddled by the fire, just waiting for something, anything. But nothing else happened. At dawn, when the first bit of gray light touched the tops of the trees, we saw them. Footprints. Human footprints, long, bare, and pressed deep into the soft earth, leading from the creek right up to the edge of our camp. And then, they just stopped. There were no tracks leading away. It was as if whatever it was had simply materialized right there and then vanished into thin air. We packed up in record time after that. Nobody said much. The whole hike back felt like we were being watched. None of us spoke until we were safely back in the truck. The moment I turned the key and the engine roared to life, Leah said quietly, "It wasn't a dream." I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't want to know. We never went camping again after that. Sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night and the road cuts through a dark patch of trees, I still think about that figure, standing there, just outside the light, waiting. And I still wonder, what the hell was that? It was supposed to be a quiet weekend getaway. Just me, my brother Eric, and his girlfriend Nora. We'd planned it for weeks, this late autumn camping trip before the snows came in. We picked a spot we knew would be remote, a forest area near Mount Rainier, where there's no service, no crowds, just us and the vast, silent wilderness. Or so we thought. We arrived as the evening was setting in. The sun was dipping low, painting the trees in these brilliant shades of orange and red. We parked by a trailhead that Eric remembered from years ago, one that led to a small, secluded campsite. It was exactly what we wanted, tucked away, surrounded by towering pines that swayed like gentle giants in the wind. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt. It's a specific kind of quiet, the kind you only find when you're miles away from everything and everyone. That deep humming silence. By the time we got the tents up, night had fallen completely. We got a small fire going, cracked open some canned food, and passed around a flask to ward off the chill. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and damp pine needles, that classic campfire scent. Nora, leaning into the warmth of the fire, started telling this old local legend. It was something about the man in the pines, a story about a hermit who supposedly vanished decades ago and now haunts campers who wander too far from their sites. We all had a good laugh, chalked it up to spooky campfire stories, and kept drinking. It felt like a perfect night. Around midnight, the firewood started running low. Eric stood up and said he'd go grab some more, disappearing into the darkness just beyond the firelight. Nora and I were left alone, just watching the flames dance. A few minutes passed, and then we heard him call out from the woods. But the voice, it didn't sound quite right. It was distant, muffled, and strangely slow. "Hey, come here. I found something." Nora frowned, looking over at me. That didn't sound like him. I strained my ears, listening. The voice came again, exactly the same strange, drawn-out tone. "Come here. I found something." This time, it was deeper in the woods, maybe 50 yards away. A little shiver went down my spine. I grabbed a flashlight, stood up and called out, "Eric, stop screwing around." Silence. Nothing but the rustling of branches in the wind. We waited another minute, our laughter gone, a nervous tension settling in. And then, suddenly, Eric stepped out from the complete opposite direction, the other side of the fire. He had an armful of wood and a confused look on his face. "What are you yelling about?" he asked. I just froze, staring at him. "Where were you?" "I was getting wood," he said, gesturing behind him. "Right over there." "Why?" My stomach twisted into a knot. "Because we heard you calling from over there," I said, pointing my flashlight into the deep, dark woods in the exact opposite direction. Eric's face went completely blank. He dropped the firewood with a thud and just stared into the darkness where I was pointing. "I wasn't there," he said, his voice barely a whisper. We tried to laugh it off after that. We told ourselves maybe we'd just imagined it, that the woods play tricks on you at night. But when Nora replayed it in her head, She said the scariest part wasn't just the voice. It was that it sounded exactly like Eric. A perfect, chilling mimicry. That night, none of us slept well. I remember waking up once, it must have been around 3 a.m. I had to pee, so I unzipped my tent and stepped outside. The fire had died down to embers, but the moon was so bright it bathed the entire forest in this eerie silver light. Everything looked washed out and strange. I glanced over at Eric and Nora's tent. It was zipped shut, quiet. But then, as I turned back toward the trees, something caught my eye. A figure. It was standing between two massive pines, almost completely hidden in the shadows. It wasn't moving at all. It was just there, watching. I blinked, trying to get my eyes to focus, thinking it was a trick of the light. For just a split second, the moonlight caught its face. It was pale, completely featureless, almost like wax. My heart slammed against my ribs. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, without making a single sound, it turned and just slipped deeper into the woods, vanishing as if it were never there. I scrambled back into my tent, my heart racing, and I didn't close my eyes again until the first light of dawn. When morning finally came, I didn't say anything to Eric or Nora. I didn't want to freak them out even more. I told myself I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. We decided to pack up and leave early. We were all on edge. But as we were getting our gear together, Eric stopped dead. He was staring at the spot where his and Nora's tent had been. It was gone. Not torn, not trampled. Completely gone. We just stood there, stunned. The stakes, the ropes, their sleeping bags, everything inside. It had vanished. We looked at the ground where it had been just hours before. It was smooth. There were no footprints, no drag marks, no sign of a struggle. Nothing. It was as if the tent had been plucked from the earth, leaving no trace behind. It was like it had never existed. We spent the next hour frantically searching the area, shouting their names, even retracing our steps down the trail, thinking maybe we'd set up in the wrong spot. But we hadn't. Eric kept trying to rationalize it, saying maybe a large animal, like a bear, had dragged it off. But Nora shot that down immediately. She pointed out there wasn't a single scrap of torn fabric anywhere. And since when do animals carefully unpin tent stakes from the ground before taking something? It made no sense. Just before we finally gave up and headed back to the car, Eric took one last, long look around the campsite. I'll never, ever forget the way his face changed. All the color drained from it. His eyes went wide, and he was just staring, frozen, at the tree line. "What?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What is it?" He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring. Then he said, so quietly I could barely hear him, "There's something out there. It's watching us." I whipped my head around to look, my eyes scanning the dense forest, but I couldn't see anything. There was just the endless stretch of pines, swaying silently in the cold morning wind. We didn't need any more convincing. We left, fast. We practically ran back to the car, not saying a word the whole way. The drive home was silent, thick with a fear we couldn't name. As we pulled away, I looked back through the rear window one last time, and I swear, for just a flicker of a second, deep between the trees, I saw movement, something tall and still, standing just beyond the edge of the shadows. To this day, Eric won't go camping anymore. He sold all his gear. Nora moved out of state a few months later, and she refuses to talk about what happened that weekend. If you bring it up, she just shuts down. Sometimes, late at night, I still wonder, what was that voice? What was that thing I saw? And if we had stayed one more night, would one of us have vanished just like the tent? I've always preferred camping alone. I know most people think that's reckless, especially around Halloween, but solitude clears my head better than anything else. When this happened, it was October 31st, 2021. I remember the date clearly because that's the part that still bothers me. The part I can't shake even now. I had the week off and decided to drive out to Devil's Bend Campground, an isolated valley between two ridgelines about an hour from where I lived. The place barely appears on maps anymore. It used to be popular in the 90s but got shut down because of wildlife concerns. But if you know the back roads, you can still get there. I'd been once before. It had about 12 old campsites, untouched fire pits, and a clearing that opened toward a shallow lake. The forest around it was dense, the kind of dense where even the air feels thick. Tall pines bending over the site, branches tangled like fingers. It always felt like the woods were listening. I arrived around 4 p.m. The sky was already dimming and the air had that cold bite that warns winter is coming. As I unloaded my gear, I noticed how quiet everything was. No birds, no bugs, just wind, and even that seemed muffled. I set up my tent at Site 3, the spot closest to the lake. The water was calm, the surface smooth like glass. I remember thinking it was too smooth. No ripples, no movement, nothing alive. For a moment I felt like I was staring into a huge black mirror. When night fell, I made a small fire, cooked a can of soup, and sat back with a thermos of coffee. I wasn't scared, at least not then. I'd been out in the wilderness plenty of times, but something felt slightly off, like the forest was waiting for something. Around 9 p.m. I heard something that made the hair on my arm stand up. A whistle, a low, steady whistle echoing from the direction of the deeper campsites. Campsite 10, maybe 11. It wasn't a tune, just one long note. Human, slow, purposeful. I turned off my lantern, letting the fire give the only light. I listened closer. Another whistle, same tone, same length. Then silence. There shouldn't have been anyone else there. No cars, no lights, no footsteps earlier. And the road in is impossible to miss. Gravel crunches loudly when a vehicle enters. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Nothing. Just the pop of my firewood. Trying not to spook myself, I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the tree line. The beam reached maybe 20 feet before dying against the density of the pines. I didn't see anything, but I felt something, like eyes following the movement of my light. I went back to the fire, trying to shrug it off, and almost convinced myself it was the wind when something else happened. A splash in the lake. A heavy one, like someone had thrown a boulder into the water. I stood up immediately, heart thumping. My flashlight shot toward the lake, cutting across the glassy water. But again, nothing, not even ripples. The surface was perfectly still, like the splash had never happened. That was the moment I felt truly uneasy. I used to think lakes were peaceful in the dark. That night, it felt like the water was hiding something. Around 11 p.m., I decided to get into my tent. I zipped it up, laid in my sleeping bag, and listened to the fire crackle outside. My eyes were getting heavy when I heard footsteps. Soft, slow, circling my tent. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped at the tent entrance. I waited for a shadow, a voice, something. But instead, I heard whispering. Not words, just soft, frantic breathing, like someone was kneeling right outside the fabric. My skin crawled. I reached slowly for my pocket knife. My heartbeat was so loud I was sure whatever was outside could hear it. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. No more footsteps, no breathing, not even wind. I don't know how long I stayed frozen like that. Maybe an hour. I eventually fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. When I woke up, it was still dark, maybe 5 a.m. The fire had completely died. Frost clung to the grass. I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, expecting to see footprints. What I found was worse. Someone had moved my camping chair. It was now facing the woods. Not the fire, not the lake, the deep woods behind campsite 10. And there was something else. Across the ground leading into the trees were damp footprints, bare footprints, larger than mine, leading into the forest, but not coming out. I felt a sharp chill crawl up my spine. I packed everything as fast as I could. I didn't even bother rolling the tent. I shoved it in the truck bed and slammed the tailgate. Before leaving, I took one last look at the lake. There was a figure, standing at the far edge of the water, tall, still, facing me. I blinked, and it was gone, completely gone. I drove out of there faster than I should have on that narrow road, and the whole time, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see someone running behind me. I never went back to Devil's Bend. I won't even drive near it anymore. And the thing that keeps me awake sometimes is that those footprints beside my tent, they weren't human. The toes were too long, the arch too sharp, and there were only 4 of them, not 5. Sometimes late at night I still hear that whistle in my head, low, steady, slow, and I still wonder what that was watching me from the lake. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever experienced anything you can't explain out in the wild, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more strange tales. Stay safe out there.